Freedom Riders. We go back now to my conversation with the Freedom Riders, Jim Zwerg, and now the Dr. Reverend Bernard Lafayette, who were also, like Diane Nash, student activists in Nashville, Tennessee in 1961. In the film Freedom Riders, it points out that Jimmy Hoffa, the Union chief, said no bus drivers, Greyhound or Trailways, was it, are going to ride these buses. They're not going to drive them.
I guess it was a union issue, but they knew it was very dangerous when someone would burn the bus like they did in Anniston, Alabama. It was not safe for whites or blacks, even whites who were not involved in the Freedom Rides, but just passengers. This mob that had no regard for anyone. And they just followed these buses, and they attacked them. They were very, indiscriminate.
But a driver did step forward to drive you.
Yes, on the condition that his supervisor would ride with him.
Jim Zwerg, did you think President Kennedy, Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, were on your side?
At the time, I've got to say, I don't think it was really a major issue that we were contemplating. We were so concerned that we felt the ride continue, that nonviolence had to show that it could overcome whatever violence you threw at it, that we would ultimately prevail, that it wasn't, for me anyway, a politically motivated thing one way or the other. It was...
The marshals were eventually brought in.
Yes.
And where were they in this journey? Bernard Lafayette.
Well, they came when the mob surrounded us at the church. The federal marshals came in. When
Dr. King was inside.
Yes.
And the other leaders.
Exactly. This mob would not go away. They threw bricks and broke stained glass windows in the church.
How many outside?
About 3,000.
How many of the people were inside, the civil rights activists?
Probably about 1,500.
Dr. King was on the phone with Attorney General Bobby Kennedy?
Yes, he was, and Diane Nash as well.
Diane Nash, the civil rights leader as well.
Right, she was our youth leader for our students and that kind of thing. And Martin Luther King represented the adult organizations as well. And James Farmer, who was there with CORE, he had returned. His father had been funeralized, and he had returned to the Freedom Rides by then. And so far as the Kennedys were concerned, they wanted to get this thing over with. In fact, they wanted to stop it because they didn't want people to get killed. So they asked for a cooling-off period because they couldn't get any support or protection from the governor of Alabama. And in terms of our nonviolent movement, we wanted to continue to move forward, and we were trained in nonviolence. But it's one thing that's not well known that's very important, and there was some taxi drivers there in Montgomery, black cab taxi drivers, and we had received word that they were mobilizing and arming themselves to come and rescue us. And there were a large number of cab drivers and taxi companies in Montgomery because during the boycott, a lot of people started driving their cars. You had 27 black cab companies in Montgomery, and some only had 2 cabs. But the thing that really struck me, and I'll never forget, is that Martin Luther King stood in the pulpit of the church, the First Baptist Church, while a mob was surrounding the church. And he said, I want a few people who really are sure about their nonviolence because we got a special mission. And everybody did not volunteer, including a lot of the ministers. But he got a little group together, maybe about 8 or 10, maybe. He walked out of that church through the mob to dissuade those cab drivers from coming with arms to rescue us. This was before the marshals showed up. And then he walked back through the mob. Now, that is one mystery in the whole thing that I have never been able to fathom.
Daniel in the lion's den.
John Siegenthaler, the president, the attorney general's envoy to you, what happened to him?
Well, I was out, but
you were unconscious.
I was unconscious. The story is that he heard and became aware of what was going on, and as he was driving towards the bus terminal, he saw Susan Wilbur and Susan Herman.
They are?
Those were two of the white students who were also exchange. Well, one was an exchange student, Susan Herman at Fisk. Susan Wilbur was from Peabody and was from Nashville, wasn't she?
Yeah.
As I recall. And as he drove up, there was a young teenager just popping these gals. And he went in and grabbed Susan Wilbur and kind of tried to get her in the car. She'd get in the car, and she grabbed the side and she said, this is not your fight. Don't get involved with this. I'm trained in nonviolence. And about that moment, somebody got to Siegenthaler and said, who are you? And he said, I'm a representative of the United States government. And somebody hit him with a pipe, and he was out.
Let's go to a clip of Freedom Riders.
We did not ask for all of the state police and the helicopters overhead. It was shameful that we could not travel peacefully without that apparatus of protection.
At 11:50 a.m. Central Standard Time, the bus hit the Mississippi line, the Alabama authorities pulling back.
We felt a very strange feeling when we were changing of the guard at the Alabama-Mississippi state line. It was very eerie. In spite of all that Alabama had done, the fear of Mississippi in the minds of many people was far greater. There was a huge billboard, and that billboard said, "Welcome to Mississippi, the Magnolia State." And when we continued to ride on, the next large sign we saw said, "Prepare to meet thy God."
As we wrap up, how this all ended and what it meant to each of you. Dr. Bernard Lafayette.
What happened is from two different points of view. One had to do with how do we go about trying to end discrimination and segregation in public transportation, because this was an area of segregation that affected a large number of people all over. And it was a drastic contrast between the North and the South, because we didn't have the segregation in the public transportation in the North. In fact, you had to change buses and change train cars when you went north. And that was very dramatic when we made travel like that. So on that particular issue, it was important. The other thing that was important was the fact that it was a new way of organizing social movements and social change struggle. In the past, we had the legal struggle, where you go to the courts and you get some kind of court ruling, and you appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. The lawyers were trained, Thurgood Marshall and all those, that whenever you take a simple case, like someone getting arrested for sitting in the wrong place or whatever, you build the case as if you're going to the Supreme Court. You're trained to do it. And that was a battle. That was a fight, the lawyers. Martin Luther King introduced another whole approach. In addition to the legal struggle, we had to work not only on legislative things, and that was another way of struggling, trying to get the law changed through Congress, but we get the masses of people involved. And that's when the Freedom Riders changed. You didn't have a select group of people who could be, disciplined, and certain people that you were aware of. But when the masses of people got involved, and you had over 400 people get involved in the Freedom Riders. So we had to then change our strategy, not go to New Orleans, but when they started arresting us in Jackson, Mississippi, we made that our battleground to fill the jails. And the purpose of filling the jail was to get more people, individuals, actively involved and participated in the movement. Because Martin Luther King believed that a change would come when people themselves had a chance to change and had a chance to be involved.
And in being imprisoned at Parchman Prison, one of the most notorious prisons?
Yes. That meant serious commitment. And by the way, the largest single group, when the demographic study was done, the single group that was there on the Freedom Rides arrested in Parchman was young Jewish women from Chicago. And that was because a professor at the University of Chicago said that he was going on a Freedom Ride, and his class said, "Can we go?"
That was Bernard Lafayette, now a professor at Emory University, and Jim's work, featured in a new documentary called The Freedom Riders, which will air on PBS's American Experience on May 16th. President Obama has proclaimed May 2011 as the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Rides. That does it for our broadcast. If you'd like to get a copy of our show, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Aaron Mate, Renee Feltz, Nermeen Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Hani Massoud, Robbie Karen, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, our engineers. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us. This